Hello creative friends, this is Joy. So this is a Lapbook that I created, and I showed you how I created it in the first 3 videos, and I decided to go back into this and add more to it. I have some leftover scraps of paper from creating the project, and I thought that I could use that to cut down to add inserts into the envelopes. So here I'm just measuring the envelopes to figure out what sizes that I need to make the inserts to go inside of them. And I just wanted to, like you see, most of the envelopes were kind of empty. I mean, I did put some little ephemera in some of them from a Tim Holtz ephemera pack that I had, but I wanted to add more, to these and to this lap book. And so here I'm just cutting down the leftover scraps of paper that I had. I'm figuring out like how to cut it so I can get the most out of the paper, and figuring out which sizes that I can cut this down to. So there's a couple of cards there, and I cut a couple of more for cards for some of the envelopes, and then here is another one for one of the longer envelopes. So after I go through and cut them all, which I'm not, didn't want to show all of them, I go around and ink all of the edges of each one of these. And I eventually go back in too and round the corners on all of these. But anyway, I just use a brown ink and kind of ink the edges on all of these to give it, a distressed look. And then I put them in, the envelopes that I cut them for. So then the next thing that I decided to do is on these envelopes here to make like little mini journals. So I went and into this paper pack and I picked a pattern paper that would go with the lap book and what I've already used in this lap book, and cut it down to the size that I would need because I need to make 4 of these. So I just cut the paper down to twice the width of the pocket that it's going in, and of course this same height as a little bit, actually I went I think about a quarter or a half inch taller than the pocket that it's going to go in, because I want it to kind of stick up. I don't want it to be too hard to get it in and out. I inked the edges as you saw there, and then I had this scrap paper from another project that was left over that I decided to cut down to use inside of these journals. So I'm measuring the cover, and I cut these down so that they're a quarter inch smaller all the way around than the covers. And I'm doing 5 at a time, so that way when I fold it over, then it'll be like 10 sheets in each one of these. So I'm just, and I have just enough paper here. I have exactly 20 sheets of paper, so I could put 5 in each little journal. So I fold the cover in half, I fold the pages in half. I decided that I'm trying to figure out how I want to bind it. I kind of like to put the string around it, but that's not really going to hold it real good. So I'm going to have to staple it. The smaller staple isn't big enough, so I decided to get my larger long arm staple, and I put paper clips on the journal to hold the pages in place, and then I staple it twice, and then I wrap the string around it and tie it. So this is basically how I made all 4 of these journals for these pockets. So I'm not going to go through and show you how I did all of them, because I did them all the same. And then I, put them in these pockets. But I also did go back in and round the corners on those. So here I have some labels that I printed out. So I'm just inking up the paper, and I decided I did it in several different fonts, and decided to use this one. I thought that it worked best. And so then I'm cutting out the labels, And here you see all the labels cut out at the top there. And then I have this other paper that's actually for making labels, so it's sticky back. And so I decided to ink that up as well because I wanted to put some of these labels on, like, something a little bit bigger. And then I cut this down to size because I wanted to add this to the 4 little small journals I just made and to the 2 larger composition journal books that I have in this Lapbook. So here I round the corners of the journal, and I'm using a 1/2 inch corner rounder there to round the corners. And then I cut down this label to the size that I think would work best. So I'm trying to figure out how big do I want this label. And once I get it the size that I want it, which I cut it down a couple of times till I got it the size that I wanted, then of course I cut a second one the same size once I figured that out, how big I want it. So I had 2 of those, and then I have 4 of these small books, so I figured out how big those labels should be. And once I figured that out, then I cut 4 of those the same size. And then I decided that I wanted to round the corners on those before I stuck them down to the books. And I'm also figuring out what labels do I want to put on which books. So I'm picking out labels like journal, diary, log, those types of labels to put on these 2 larger composition books and the 4 little books that I made. So that's what I'm doing here, is figuring out, okay, which 4 do I want to use on the smaller ones and which 2 do I want to use on the larger ones. And then once I figured that out, I went to round the corner of the label, and I was using the 1/2 inch like I did on the corners of the journal, but it didn't look right, so I ended up having to cut another one and use the 1/4 inch, which looked better to me. So I'm doing that to all of these, rounding all the corners, including the ones that I cut for the bigger journals here. And then once I got those ready, then I took the brown ink and I decided to go around the edges of each of the labels. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm just swiping the labels that I just created across the brown ink pad to ink them up further, because it just seemed like they needed a little bit more ink around the edges. And then once I got those inked up, then I started to add the labels to the book. And I'm just using a glue stick, but it's a Craft Bond heavy bond glue stick. It's heavy duty instead of like the school glue stick. So I go around the label with the black pen, and then I peel off the back and then stick that down where I want it on the book. And I do the same for, and then that's how it will go in the pocket. And like I said, I have 4 of those that I made, so I'll do all 4 labels. Do the same with the larger journals. I'm sticking down what label I wanted on there. Go around it with a black pen, peeled off the back and stuck it down. And then I did the other larger journal the same. And when I went to stick the other one down, I just kind of lightly laid it on top so that I can look to see if it was in the same general location as the other one, and stuck that down. So then once I did all of that, I took the rest of the labels and decided where I wanted to put them. So I put labels on these envelopes, and then I also put labels on the tabs, the folder tabs. I decided what labels I wanted there. So I think one of them is like letters and one's documents and for the folder tabs. And then on the envelopes, it was like official or, to do or whatever, those kinds of things, I believe, labels that I put on them. So I went through the whole lap book until I decided, where I wanted to put all these labels. So not everything has a label, but, you know, I did use up all the labels, so mostly everything had a label. So I decided I wanted to make a little book for this pocket as well and use this piece of ephemera to put on the front of it as the cover. So here I just pulled out some pages from an old planner because I like the lines on this. And then I end up cutting it down to the size of my cover that I just cut to match the size of that piece of ephemera that I wanted to use on the cover. So I'm cutting it down. And I was going to fold it in half, except for the back side didn't have that line down the left side of it. And I like that line down the left side, and so I wanted that to be on the front. So when you fold it, the line's down the front until you get towards the back pages, and then they're not. So I decided, well, I'm just going to cut this in half, and I'll figure out another way to put it together. And so I'm just figuring out how I'm going to put this together, and I felt like I need to, cut a little bit more off, although I cut a little bit more than I would have liked. But anyway, it worked out. And so then I decided to put this in here and staple it, and then that way you can open it like that. But I wanted to tie a string on it as well, like the other ones. So I get my string on there, I put my pages in there, and then I do the staple, and then I round the corners of this and the pages, tie the string on the top, and then adhere that piece of ephemera to the front of it that I wanted to add. So at first I used double stick tape, and then I used some of that Heavy Bond craft glue and to stick that on the front of this little journal that I created. And then I decided to ink the edges on this journal as well to give it that antique look. So I do the front and then I do the back. And then I'll show you a flip through. I made another journal as well for one of the longer envelopes, and then you'll see that at the end with a flip through. So here on this left side, there's a pocket, and then I added some extra inserts there and inserts in each of these envelopes, and then inserts in all of these envelopes, and then in this one as well, and in that one, and there's a pocket, and then here's one of the journals. You got two on the left, and then there's two more on the other side, and then some more inserts into those envelopes. And then on the other side, there's the two journals. On the other side, you have a pocket, and then here is the other little like journal I made for that, and just plain paper inside. And then my inserts that I added, inserts for those, inserts there. There's the one journal that I made, a pocket, more inserts, and then on the right hand there's the other two journals. So that's the finished lap book. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and we'll talk to you again later. Bye bye.